Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me today is Lisa Johnson-Firth of Immigrants First, PLLC. In addition to being an attorney, she is also a member of the Centreville Immigration Forum's Board of Directors. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
So immigration is top of mind in our area, as it is across the country, since Donald Trump was elected president and has made immigration a sort of a keystone issue. He made it an issue on his campaign trail, and now that he's in the White House. In addition to building walls, people are hearing terms like sanctuary city. People are hearing the term ICE. And so I want to ask you a little bit about how you are seeing how this is impacting the Northern Virginia area. We are a very multinational, multicultural area. We have a lot of new Americans and immigrants and people of varying statuses. In your position, what are you seeing currently, and how do you see going forward a way that we can help?
Well, I think there have been a lot of changes since Donald Trump took the presidency. Not to be an alarmist, but ICE did arrest over 80 people just 2 weeks ago in the Northern Virginia area, and there are so many arrests now that our local ICE facility, ICE standing for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, our local ICE facility is Farmville, and it's about 4 hours away from here. And Farmville is running out of bed space. And so once people are detained by ICE that are from this area, they're now no longer even being housed in this area while they await their immigration proceedings in immigration court, which is a serious problem for legal representation, for families to be able to visit them. They're being sent off to Louisiana, Texas, Alabama. And so not only are these jurisdictions far away from legal resources that they have here and family, but where they're going, the lawyers here are not as familiar with the processes in those jails. And so it's very difficult to represent the clients or even contact them, even talk to them on the telephone. So that's a serious due process issue. We also are within 100 miles of the border. And so under Trump, our, quote, border of the United States, when you look at a map of the United States, you usually just see or think of the border as being the edge of the country. Our border is now being construed to be 100 miles wide. And within that 100-mile wide border, our due process rights are being severely diminished. For instance, any person who's been in the United States for less than 2 years that is found to be within that 100-mile border of the United States is subject to what's called expedite removal, where ICE can simply arrest someone and deport them without due process from an immigration judge. So there's a huge increase in arrests. Our immigration court, our local immigration court in Arlington, is so overbooked that they're hiring many new judges. They have over 30,000 cases. Some of our cases are extended out into like 2023. So our system is extremely overloaded and under stress, the immigration system and enforcement system here, as well as the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, the benefit side of the agency, is also very behind in its processing of applications, work permits. So there is a lot of changes. I'm happy to continue talking about this.
Well, the point is, though, is that a lot of people are getting caught up in this because this gets into profiling too. So it's not just raiding places where there are known or suspected illegal immigrants. This is a point of stopping and investigating the status of people who may look like they could be illegal immigrants,
Correct.
Which is also sort of a problem with, illegal search and seizure or due process or all of these other things that we as American citizens take for granted we're entitled to. So what is the recourse for people who get caught up in show me your papers?
That is a really challenging issue, and we have actually talked to various police departments on this very issue. For instance, as a white woman, if I was stopped by the police and asked my legal status, would I have the right to say, no, I'm not going to share that information with you? Of course I could say that, But what happens is, and this is the danger, especially for out-of-status immigrants, is even if they refuse to answer that question, they're very polite and considerate, they could be charged with obstruction of justice for failing to cooperate with law enforcement. And some officers that we've spoken to have said that they may consider arresting a person who doesn't answer that question. So although you have the right to remain silent, you also have this other issue of you may be forced to answer questions, and if you don't, you could be facing an obstruction charge, which very well may be dismissed once you go to court. But in this jurisdiction, in Northern Virginia, there are jurisdictions that cooperate with ICE. And if you spend even one night in the jail, you can be arrested by ICE and find yourself in removal proceedings. So it's a high-risk game for people who are not U.S. citizens to be faced with this profiling question and trying to figure out whether to answer that question.
Well, I think it impacts all of us. If somebody asked me to prove right now today that I'm a citizen of the United States, I have my driver's license with me, right? So I don't walk around with papers. That's not the country that we are, where people walk around having to prove that they're entitled to be here. And so I think that's problematic. I also think that in addition to the fact that our system is overloaded quite unexpectedly, police have not necessarily been trained in this either. We're asking them, as in so many things, to deal with this idea that local police are part of this enforcement. How is that playing out in communities?
Local police in Virginia are not part of ICE enforcement, except for the fact that if someone, for instance, let's say there's a police stop and the police apprehend them, they have them stopped, and they search their background. All of the databases, the immigration databases and the criminal databases are linked. And so if there is an outstanding removal order and the person has a serious criminal past, maybe also a failure to appear, the police will then communicate that information to immigration. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that ICE is not contacted until the person is at the local jail. Fairfax, Prince William actually has ICE officers in their jail. But at that point, then everyone is screened for their legal status.
Right. So what I think people are most concerned about, or at least that, is the impact that this is having on families with children. Because especially if you have a single-headed household, and let's face it, there's a lot of single mothers out there with children, this becomes an issue of what happens to children when parents are summarily taken into custody or removed.
Right. It's obviously very traumatizing for children. I trained Head Start teachers in Prince William on immigration issues such as this, because they are on the front lines of seeing children who are in distress from having a parent removed from the home. And, when ICE takes someone into custody, you may not even be able to contact that person for a couple days. In fact, you may not even know where they are. You think they're arrested by the police, and then it turns out they have an ICE detainer at the jail and they're turned over to immigration and they sort of disappear for a couple days. So it's very unnerving and alarming for the family members, especially for children. They suffer a lot of severe trauma as a result of family separation.
So have you seen social service organizations or nonprofits trying to kind of move in to assist in any way with what to do with these kids?
I think the schools have been slow to respond in terms of counseling and supporting children who are remaining behind in schools. It's difficult for them to address some of these issues, and they haven't really been trained in the cultural relative issues and the effect of deportation on a family. In terms of other nonprofits, there are some good nonprofits in the area. Northern Virginia Family Services is a nonprofit that provides free counseling for families in certain situations, and Axe Turning Points is a great nonprofit that helps women and children who are in distress, particularly from domestic violence or other emergent situations. So we have them, but they're not really equipped to deal with all the families that are finding themselves, split by removal proceedings, which is in the many, many thousands in this area. So
and the other part of that is that a lot of these children, if not all of these children, are American citizens, the ones who were born here.
Many are, but some aren't.
Right.
So for the American citizen children, they obviously have the right to remain in the United States. They can't be deported. But as a practical matter, if one or both parents are being deported,
Right, what happens?
then there is, the problem of the child may stay with another family member or a friend and be left behind. So there's family separation there. They may be placed in foster care. The Mexican consulate has been very proactive in helping families prepare to take their children back to Mexico, for instance, because it's not just a simple matter of taking your U.S. citizen children to another country. They may not be citizens or may not have the documentation to prove that they're citizens of Mexico or El Salvador or Guatemala. And so, one of the things that families need to do is make sure that they have proof that that child is also a citizen of the country of where the parents are from, so that the parents can take their children back with them if they need to.
This sounds like an administrative nightmare of epic proportions,
It
in which
is.
real people, real lives, real children are being impacted, and the uncertainty and anxiety just must be overwhelming, especially to the schools or, that have to deal with the aftermath of this. But as far as foster care goes, I mean, is that something that could also end up putting more kids into the foster care system than we've seen up to this point?
I mean, it certainly is. I'm not an expert on the foster care system, but of course, if you have U.S. citizen children left behind and there's no one to take care of those children, then yes. I haven't heard of it as much now that ICE simply is apprehending the only remaining parent taking care of the children. If there are no parents at home, ICE will generally arrest that person, but then release the person to go back home. They'll be in removal proceedings, but they will allow the person to go back home unless they're a danger to the community, to make provision and allowance for what's going to happen to the children, like putting in place a power of attorney for someone else to take care of the children, while they're gone. Outside of the United States. So, but it was only 10 years ago when ICE was doing a lot more, quote, raids than they are now, where parents were arrested and they just didn't see their kids again, and the children were left behind and placed in foster care. I think that we've learned a little bit from that, and ICE is now a little more compassionate to allow at least one parent to stay at home.
I think the most troubling thing to me is that this is not the narrative that I have of what it means to be an American. I mean, this is not the narrative I have about how our country operates. This is a narrative from a different time, a different place, and a different circumstance, where people were brutally taken away and families were ripped apart. And that is just not how I see this country in 2017. So I want to come back. I want to get back with you at some future point. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to have Terry Angelotti from the Centreville Labor Resource Center, which is also part of the Centreville Immigration Forum. And Terry's going to be talking with us about the people that they serve in the center and some of the impacts they have seen thus far on these new immigration policies coming out of the Trump White House. So please join us.
Calls me googly eyes.
And you know you're beautiful, right? You know that?
Even you are beautiful. I got bullied for wearing glasses. Share if you're against bullying.
We put it out there, just took off. 3 million people have shared this post. Don't let bullies get you down. I stand with you. Our whole family's wearing glasses. I wear glasses and I'm proud.
I even have the army on my team.
All the kind comments brought my child joy. I don't feel thank you is enough.
That's
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we are talking about immigration and its impact here in Northern Virginia. Joining me in this segment is Terry Angelotti. She is the Executive Director of the Centreville Labor Resource Center. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you very much.
So, the Centreville Labor Resource Center is part of the Centreville Immigration Forum.
Right.
The forum having been started in 2007. And the Centreville Labor Resource Center having opened in 2011.
Right.
So full disclosure, I'm a Rotarian with the Centreville Chantilly Rotary Club, and we support and have for years the Centreville Labor Resource Center.
And we really appreciate the support of the Rotary. You guys have been great.
Well, thank you. And one of the things that's important about the Centreville Labor Resource Center is it does not use one penny of taxpayer money, which was going back to the uproar of 2007 and the day labor issue there. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of the issue that people in the community had.
Right. That was a lesson learned actually from the Labor Center that operated in Herndon for just under 2 years. They depended on a lot of county support, and that was wonderful while the town council was with them. But when the tides changed and a new town council was voted in, they lost support for that funding, they lost that funding, and they had to close the center. So the biggest thing they told us when we were organizing is don't accept government funding. And so far we've been able to operate that way for 5 years. It took us about 1.5 years of fundraising and organizing before we could open the center, before we had enough money to hire staff. And for the 5 years that we've been open, we've been able to survive on foundation grants. We get a lot of support from our local faith communities, and then individuals. Just small donors and large donors. A lot of individuals are supporting us.
So both in Herndon and in Centreville, the initial problem was that day laborers were standing on the corner in a very visible spot trying to get day work. There were a lot of reasons that didn't work for many reasons, and one of them is because not only is it not a great way to try to get work, but a lot of these workers were also having wage theft. So the workers were performing work, they were not getting paid, and then they had no recourse. So right. it was a broken, haphazard system, and so bringing them into the center has had many, many benefits for both the workers, for the people who hire the workers, for their families. So tell us a little bit about what it's looked like for the past 5 years as you've grown and developed these relationships.
Well, it's a great resource for the community. A lot of the people who hire our homeowners, over 70% are homeowners rather than contractors. And they tell us time and time again how much they appreciate being able to connect up with someone who can do the work that they need. And it's a better protection for them because the workers say what their skills are, and we have that in a database, whereas if you just drive up to the street corner, it's really whoever runs the fastest and hops in the car. Right. You don't know that they really know how to paint or whatever it is that you need them to do. So it's been good for the homeowners. It's been great for the workers because not only are they protected from wage theft, but they also have access to English classes almost daily. While they're waiting for work, we offer English classes. And then we have skills training classes, sometimes during the day, sometimes they come in the evening to build their skills. So someone who comes with just general labor skills might, when they walk in the door, only be able to accept jobs doing mulch or leaf raking or that kind of work, can learn how to paint. And then instead of making $15 an hour spreading mulch, they can make $20 painting. So that brings up the income levels of not just the worker, but their family as well.
Absolutely, and I have seen that it has strengthened the community by having people who make a livable wage or close to a livable wage.
Because they spend that money there in the community,
Absolutely.
Most of it. Yeah, our local businesses are being helped out by that, definitely.
And so going forward, let's talk about how the atmosphere has changed since Trump came to the White House, and clearly there is concern in Northern Virginia. I understand that there's a new coalition in Western Fairfax where they had a recent meeting, 28 organizations and 55 participants. 28 organizations, all in Western Fairfax, who came together to talk about immigration issue, to me is very powerful, very powerful. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of that.
Yeah. Well, our center's been operating as normal since the election. There hasn't been an impact on our day-to-day operations, but it was not long after the election that we realized that some of this rhetoric was going to turn into policy, and nonprofits, don't have big budgets. So we realized we really needed to work together on this to respond. So we invited immigration attorneys, nonprofits who serve low-income people of all types, schools, and also faith communities. because if there's an increase in deportations, that's going to affect all of those entities. And I know you and Lisa talked a little bit about the impact on the children and how that impacts the schools. So we really need to get together and say, okay, is there something that faith communities can do to support the schools, or something that the schools can do to support nonprofits? How can nonprofits pool their resources and support each other? Because if a breadwinner is deported, there's going to be an increase in the number of people going to food pantries and asking for rent assistance. And so there's going to be a trickle-down effect on all of these agencies. So we invited people to come together in December and really just to brainstorm what things might look like later and what were the biggest concerns. And then after that, we've been inviting speakers to come each month to just inform ourselves and learn more about those concerns. So we've had visitors from the schools, from the county, from the sheriff's department.
And that's great. It seems to me that the community seems to be pulling together in a positive way.
Definitely.
To look out for their friends and neighbors, because it's one thing to talk about immigration policy as far as this idea that people are here illegally, but these are people that have neighbors and friends and they're part of larger communities. Mm-hmm. They're people that we know. They're families that we care about. They have become part of the fabric of our community, and now what looms is this anxiety about not knowing what could or might happen. How are you trying to prepare for this? It sounds like this group is actively trying to read the tea leaves.
and just getting people in touch with each other is vital. One of the things that we've accomplished is working with the Board of Supervisors. They recently passed a statement embracing diversity and clarifying that county resources would not be used to enforce federal immigration law. And it's not a change, it's nothing new, but there were a lot of rumors and a lot of concerns. So just to have the Board of Supervisors pass unanimously this embracing of diversity and what our county is all about and what they will and won't do, I think it was a first step and lays the groundwork now. As policies change, as new issues arise, they'll be able to address those specifically.
So tell us a little bit about how people who've never heard of the Centreville Immigration Forum, or people who have never heard of the Centreville Labor Resource Center, can help get involved. If this is an issue that they want to work with you or with this Western Fairfax Coalition, in what ways can people get involved?
Yeah, we have lots of volunteer opportunities. You do not need to know how to speak Spanish to help us out. Although if you are bilingual, that's wonderful, and we have some special jobs for you. But we have volunteers who teach our English classes, who present skills training sessions, who work directly with the workers and filling out forms or even driving them to legal appointments occasionally. But in addition to that, we have a whole network of committees. You can get involved in the strategy group or in one of our committees that helps us to be a stronger organization, our finance committee, if you're a retired CPA, for instance, or our marketing committee, if you have that kind of a background. So all of these ways help our organization to be stronger and better serve the community. We have a volunteer coordinator, so you can contact her, and I'll give you the email address to share with your viewers. And we have volunteer orientation sessions every other month. So volunteering's the first way. The second way is if you want to support us financially, because we do rely on individual contributions. That's a vital way to make sure that we remain a strong organization.
Because you do have paid staff.
Yes, we do.
So that's the expense. You've been fortunate in your space. Many thanks to Al Dwoskin.
Definitely, yes.
Many thanks to Al Dwoskin, good man. But there are expenses, just to keep the lights on, but basically you have paid staff. And
we just have 3 paid staff, but That's our biggest expense.
Right, and it is for most organizations. Mm-hmm. And so when people donate, they have to understand that part of it is you're funding the infrastructure of the people who are helping to run the organization.
Right.
What about bringing in organizations to this table? If people belong to an organization, like I'm a Rotarian,
right.
If people belong to organizations and they want to be part of this coalition you've put together, is that something where you would welcome other groups that have not previously been involved?
We do. We're always open to new participation. And in fact, I talked to one leader at a church in the Fairfax County section of Alexandria. And she said, well, what about the Eastern Fairfax County Immigration Strategy Group? I said, well, there isn't one yet, but if you'd like to start one. And that's in all seriousness. We would love to help people on that side of the county do what we're doing. And of course, there's lots of ways that we can work together, but we're a very locally focused organization.
Right. And so this is the interesting thing about the original day laborers in Herndon and how that was a success until it fell apart and wasn't a success. Centreville learned from that model and for 5 years has been doing it very successfully. So one would look at that and say, well, you have figured this out. But clearly there are places all over Northern Virginia, all over the state, all over the country who need to figure out a model as successful as the one you have. But you know, part of the thing with limited resources and bandwidth is that you don't necessarily have people who can go out and help other people to start their own labor resource center.
Some people have asked us if we would open up new centers in various other places. And
right, I can understand that.
We don't have the bandwidth to do that. We're flattered that people come and visit us and say, this is great, I want one in my community. But we're very happy to meet with folks. And we've done that in the past too. Have people visit us, attend our board meetings, talk to our workers, and try to figure out how to get organized. Yeah, we definitely are able to do that.
You know, trying to be very optimistic, that could be a silver lining to this renewed interest and focus on immigration policy, is the fact that maybe communities really do need to learn how to better work with the people in their communities, you know, who need assistance with employment or, you know, figuring out how to make a living wage and support their families and communities everywhere. And so I'm going to be optimistic and say that could result from that.
And while 90% of the people we serve are more recent immigrants, and we serve mainly a population from Guatemala, but that other 10%, most are born in the U.S. So we serve a need because so many job skills training programs focus on computer work and office work and finding people those types of jobs, that there are very few programs that focus on labor. And we need skills trade people, you know, painters
absolutely.
and carpenters and plumbers and electricians.
Yeah. I mean, we can't figure out how to use technology to fix our plumbing problems. So we will, for the foreseeable future, always need plumbers and electricians and painters and HVAC people. And so I see focusing on the positive part of this as a really great way to move forward when we're talking about the current state of immigration and not just all the issues and problems of which there are a lot of unknowns. There's just a lot of unknowns right now. But I think if people want to get involved, that this is the way to do that, is to reach out to the Centreville Labor Resource Center. So thank you, Terry Angelotti, for being here. Thank you for being here. If you want to get in touch, it's CentrevilleLRC.org, correct?
Our website?
Yes.
Because that's our mailing address,
Okay.
is contact@CentrevilleLRC.org. The mailing address is Centreville Immigration Forum.
Okay, terrific. So that's what you need to know. That's what you need to know about immigration. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.